Well, I'm back with another episode of Pit Stop. Today I'm gonna be putting in a new controller receiver ESC in my Axial AX10, and I've also got a metal gear to complete the metal gear setup in the transmission, because I bought it used, and for some reason there was 2 metal gears in the transmission and 1 plastic one. And I got tired of stripping the plastic one, and I've run out of spares. So I bought the metal one, and that's gonna go in there. Also got a Traxxas connector here because the axial connector is on a Dean's connection. It doesn't come with a Traxxas connection. I didn't expect it to. So I'm gonna have to solder that on before I can put that in there. I'm gonna get the controller out of the box, and I'll be back in a second. Alright, one thing I don't like about the Spectrum controller is the steering wheel. It's plastic. I don't really like plastic. On my other controllers, the grip is rubber, and the old one it was foam. It's plastic. I don't like that. Also, this handle, it feels kind of cramped. I never thought I'd be saying this. The Chinese knockoff is more comfortable to hold than the very expensive Spectrum DX2E. I never thought I'd be saying that. I want to figure out what this controller is called now. But those two things aside, it seems it's a pretty basic controller. It's going to do what I need it to do, and I was using mostly in-store credit, so I bought what they had. That's it on the controller. Came with instructions. Don't need those. Bind plug to bind the controller to the receiver. So I'm gonna get to start tearing out the old receiver and old ESC and taking the transmission off on the AX10. I'll be back in a second. Alright, to access the electronics of an Axial AX10, there's a plate on top, and it should have 2 screws in it. Rather they're Phillips or Allen wrench screws. Mine are both Phillips. So after you remove those screws, this plate will fold out, and then you have access to the electronics. I'm going to do that, and then we'll be back. So after you have removed the screws, the plate will fold out, and you can access the receiver and the ESC. My receiver and ESC are both attached with double-sided tape. You can use a lot of things. I've seen people use hot glue. You can use regular duct tape and roll it. I mean, it really is up to you. So I'm going to take the old receiver off and the ESC off, and then I'm going to show you how to take the transmission off. We'll be back in a second. So I removed the old receiver and the old ESC, but I have a use for this ESC later. Old receiver, it's just the receiver that's broken. The controller is okay, so I'm going to remove, I don't know what to call this. Once again, tech before my time. They're like synchronizing, so kind of like a bind plug, but the older version of it. This receiver is it's gone. It's broken. The creek and water and electronics and current done it in. So you know it died. After you've removed all of the double-sided tape. You should have a fairly bare axial plate. Mine's got duct tape marks all over it because when I first started working on this, I did not know of the wonderful invention known as double-sided tape. So I use duct tape. Well, that's that. Now to remove the transmission is a little bit more tricky. You have to remove the screws and basically take the skid plate and the transmission out from underneath it. So what you do is take a screwdriver and you remove this screw here and this screw. Do the same on the other side, and this skid plate with the motor and the transmission and the upper halves of the drive shafts should basically fall right out. So I'm going to do that and show you that. So I removed those screws and they hold the bottom links of the suspension on, and literally the transmission falls out of the crawler. So now you just pull it off the drive shafts, and there you have your transmission, your motor mount, and all that other wonderful stuff. To remove the transmission, there's 4 countersunk screws on the bottom of the skid plate. You remove those and the transmission and the engine all come off from the skid plate. I'm going to remove that and I'll be back in a second. I removed the screws and the skid plate comes right off. Now you detach the motor from the motor mount, and then you can remove all of the Allen wrench screws to take the transmission apart. So I'm going to do that and I'll be back in a second. Well, I removed the motor by taking the 2 screws out. We're going to put that away because we're going to need that when we put it all back together. Now, to take apart the transmission, you have to unbolt, you have to take off a lot of screws. There's one screw that has a bolt on the end of it, so you're going to need a pair of pliers or vice grips to hold that into place while you screw out the screw in the other end. That's really the only thing that I have to talk about this transmission. I'm going to take it apart and show you the inside, and we'll be back in a second. Alright, so I removed all the bolts. Now, well, scratch that. I did not remove all the bolts. To unscrew the slipper clutch / another something that holds it all together. So now that's off. Fairly. Dadgummit, I missed a bolt. Wrong size. Now you can take the transmission apart. Now you take out the plastic gear, the one you're wanting to replace. There's this pin inside of it. You're going to need that. Set that somewhere else. To get the ball bearings out, I usually just take a screwdriver, I put the end in there, I kind of poke them out, I guess you could say. Well, I'm going to do that off camera because it might take a while. I'll be back in a second. Well, I removed the bearings, and now open up this nice, new, shiny metal gear. And put the ball bearings back in there. You just simply slide them in. And that pin earlier that I said you're going to need to keep, you're going to put it back through. Put the new gear in the same position the old gear was in. Then you just reassemble the transmission backwards the way you took it apart. And so I'm going to do that off camera. And we'll be back with installing the ESC and receiver and controller. Well, I reassembled the transmission and I put everything back into place, screwed all the bolts in, and so the transmission's done. That's gonna go over here for a while. Now, for the ESC. It doesn't seem to have a power switch. It's kind of strange. I guess when you plug it in, it turns it on. Well, I'm gonna go solder the Traxxas connection onto this, and when that's done, we'll reassemble everything. I'll be back in a bit. Well, I figured out where I wanted to put the ESC and receiver, and I soldered on the new plug. I went with the old receiver and my old 2.4 gigahertz controller instead of the new Spectrum one, because like I mentioned earlier in the video, I like the rubberized grip better and the older one is more comfortable, and this receiver has more channels, and I'm eventually wanting to put lights on this, so that's better for that purpose. So it doesn't have the Spectrum DX2E on it, it's got the other controller, the one I like, the one that's comfortable. And so I'm going to put it back together and I'll show you guys it working. Alright, so here's the AX10 all put back together. Everything's on there, the metal gears are in the transmission. I put the old, not the old receiver, but the receiver from my magnet and the controller from my magnet monster truck in the rock collar, because like I said, I like these better, they're more comfortable. The Spectrum DX2 that I bought, I connected it to my Losi Mini T. You probably won't see an install video on that, because it was just something I did while I was doing this. But that's where the other controller went. I put this one on there because, like I said, it's a lot more comfortable. I like the rubberized grip. And I'm gonna plug in the battery and show you guys it working. Make sure the controller's on. You always turn your controller on before you turn the car on. Make sure everything's all put down. I'm gonna put it on the floor. Well, it works well. I like the new ESC. I like the new controller, not the new old controller. And that's it for this video. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And as always, Wiley signing off.